First things first, I'm Ian Simmons. I forgot to actually mention my name during the inaugural episode of the Kicking the Seat YouTube channel, movie reviews from the last guy anyone asks. But yes, that's me, Ian Simmons. I run the site, I run the channel. I'm the main film critic for Kicking the Seat, and I have been for about 10 years. So now that that's out of the way, in case some of you couldn't read this ultra crystal clear web banner, logo, whatever you want to call it, there it is, and here I am. So I woke up this morning thinking about two things, Tom Cruise and Spider-Man. Now, there's no late-breaking news about Tom Cruise getting the role of Spider-Man. I was just thinking about the fact that I read an interview probably a couple of years ago in which Tom Cruise claimed to watch one movie a day. Now, I and many others, I think, thought that was crazy, hyperbolic, probably just self-promotional nonsense. I mean, it's Tom Cruise. He's hanging upside down from helicopters and airplanes and defeating fake terrorists and all this other stuff. How does he have time to watch a movie a day, essentially? Until somewhat recently, I began keeping an Excel doc, because I'm a big nerd, of all of the movies that I watch, because maybe it's because I'm getting older, maybe it's because I see too many movies, I start to forget what I've seen. So I'm keeping a list of all the movies that I watch every month, and we're at July 2nd right now, and for the month of June I watched 20 movies, which is insane to me. I don't know, maybe that's not a lot for a lot of film freaks out there, but for the average person, I know folks who go to the movies once a year, maybe twice, as kind of a treat. But this is what I do. I go to movies, I rent movies, I buy movies and watch them. So yeah, it's become a bit of an obsession. So no more judgments on Mr. Cruise, at least not for his movie watching habits. The other thing, Spider-Man. I saw Spider-Man Far From Home, which is coming out this coming Friday. I saw it almost a week ago, and I keep running into this bizarre mental paradox where I don't feel like I've seen it yet. I know I watched it. I know I did over an hour-long podcast afterwards, which will also be coming out on Friday. Plug. But my recollections of it are hazy. I saw a great photo yesterday on Facebook, I think it was, someone shared it, of Jake Gyllenhaal, Tom Holland, and Zendaya visiting the children's hospital in full costume, which was really cool to see. And I was like, oh man, that's great. I want to support that movie. I can't wait to see Spider-Man Far From Home. And then I realized I saw it last week. Now, that doesn't speak too well, perhaps, of the impression it left on me, and as you'll hear on Friday's show, which you can hear at kickseat.com, that's going to be the podcast coming out on July 5th, whatever the day that is. Again, I'm losing track of time. The movie didn't knock me out, and I was definitely in the minority opinion of that on the roundtable that we had going, so take that all with a grain of salt. So, yeah. I think there can be such a thing as watching too many movies, but also it comes back to a film critic thing where we get to see movies early. And because we get to see so many movies so early that it kind of begins getting all jumbled up as far as when things actually come out. Sometimes we see something the week before release and we're thinking, oh, everybody's seen this by now. It happened with the last couple of Star Wars movies. I think we saw that more than a week ahead of release, and we're walking around with all these spoilers and secrets and everything in our head, interacting with people who are Star Wars fans like, man, I can't wait to see that movie. And you're thinking, well, I've seen it. Why don't you know this? It's a very bizarre phenomenon. I was going to do something more heavy-hitting today as far as film critics, which I promised, but I think I'll save that for another video, possibly the next one, because I woke up with this bug in my head and I just wanted to get it out. So it's a film critic paradox of sorts. One thing I do want to talk about is Mike Crowley from YPA Reviews, another YouTube channel that you should definitely subscribe to. He left a comment in the initial video picking up on something I had said about loving movies that everybody hates or hating movies that everybody loves, and could I give some examples? There are too many. That could take up several weeks worth of 5-minute videos, and I don't have that kind of time or inclination, and I doubt neither do you, but hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you want me to do an entire video series on movies that I brush up against the popular consensus on, but I'm warning you, there are a lot of them. So I wanted to bring up a couple of examples, recent examples that I will be talking about probably in the next episode. Over the weekend, I went to go see the movie Booksmart, which came and went. It came out over Memorial Day weekend and just got buried. No one went to see it. And as far as the coverage of it, most of the coverage surrounded the fact that it was such a critical hit, but it did very poorly at the box office. There was a lot of groundswell of social media support, but that didn't translate into dollars. I finally caught up with it, and I definitely have some thoughts, and they do go contrary to the popular consensus, at least critically. Another film that I watched the night after that was called Fighting with My Family, which is a movie that, again, critical success, came out a couple months ago and nobody saw it. It had The Rock. It was a Universal picture. It was about the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, or WWF or WWE, whatever it's called now. It was a great little, kind of a heart-tugging comedy, and I really dug it. And I found some parallels, not just in the lack of box office response to it, or public response and dialogue, but also thematically, which I'll talk about next time, I think, because that ties back into more what the beefier issue I want to get into as far as critics and how they bump up against audience tastes. One other film, before, I don't want to keep this too rambling, but it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. I just woke up and I've had not enough of this, not Door County coffee, but it's just the mug, but coffee. Okay, that gives me a new little brain boost that I need to keep going. I'm going to see a movie tonight, which should be no surprise to anyone, considering I just started off by talking about how many movies I see. It's not a brag, it's a call for help, so please. No, I'm going to see Midsommar, which opens tonight, along with Spider-Man Far From Home. That is the movie from Ari Aster, who directed Hereditary last year, which was a big critical and a pretty good box office success. I'm going to be talking about that on a podcast this weekend. I hadn't planned to see it because I wasn't a big fan of Hereditary and I missed the critics screening, but after some prompting from some friends, mostly Emmanuel Noisette of Eman's Movie Reviews and David Fowley of Keeping It Real, another site you should definitely check out, I decided to go check it out for myself because Eman dug Hereditary. David and I really did not. We saw it together, we talked about it on a show, but they're both like, we got to get your thoughts on Midsommar. So I'm paying to go see Midsommar, and from most accounts, I'm going to pay for it twice, as they say. But again, the Rotten Tomatoes score for that movie is something like 80-85% as of this recording, so it might be another case where I just not am in line with popular opinion, or maybe I'm not in alignment with the opinion of the minority of critics who don't like it, namely my friends, so that could be a really interesting conversation. If everything goes according to plan, you will actually be able to watch that Midsommar exchange early next week, because I have a feeling that's going to be the first YouTube video roundtable that we do. So if it doesn't go according to plan, if you end up listening to it on the podcast, it means things went horribly wrong. But I'm trying to stay positive. This is a fun new venture. I'm glad you're joining me for it. So thank you again for listening to this. Before I go, for watching this. I got to get used to this non-podcast, non-audio podcast environment I find myself in. But before I go, I do want to recommend something. It's a piece from vulture.com written by my friend and colleague Nick Allen of RogerEbert.com about the Beatles-inspired movies that have come out over the decades. We saw and we talked about yesterday. That was on last Friday's podcast. I'm just throwing all these podcasts at you. I'm sorry. If you want to keep up with everything, just go to kickseat.com and you'll see a catalog of all the stuff I'm rambling about. But we talked about yesterday, which is about a guy who wakes up in a universe where the Beatles never existed. He's a struggling musician. He kind of appropriates their music as his own, and all sorts of wackiness ensues. But Nick did a deep dive into all of, or at least a good portion of the movies that were about Beatles fandom, and music and movies that were inspired by the Beatles. Sorry, movies containing music that was inspired by the Beatles. I think I have that right. So it's a really fun piece. There's a lot of gems in there that I hadn't heard of, or at least maybe I'd heard of but never bothered to watch. So I'm definitely going to have to go do some more homework. Again, that's vulture.com. It's Nick Allen. He's a great writer. And if you listen to the Yesterday podcast, he's a pretty funny dude. So thank you, Nick, for the recommendation and for hanging out. And thank you for hanging out. I think I'm going to cut this short because I have a feeling I'm going way over the 5-minute limit, which was not strict by any means. But again, please, if you like this content, like the channel, subscribe to the channel, share this video. Really appreciate it. We're a young channel, but a dedicated one, which I guess will be proven out by the amount of videos we are going to put out. So don't take my word for it, or maybe take my word for it, and please come back on, we'll call it Thursday. Thursday we'll be talking about something a bit more substantive. We'll call that Fighting with My Family and Booksmart. Two movies that a lot of critics loved, but not a lot of people saw, and I'll see if I can break down why that might be the case. Yeah, so until next time, thanks again, and take care.